This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. And if you could, please do me a favor and take a moment and leave a rating and review in whatever podcast player you're listening to this on, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, doesn't matter. I would greatly appreciate it. And that feedback really helps get other listeners to the show. Also, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you feel so inclined, you can go to geekleader.com/tip and donate to the show. Thanks so much. All right, Geek Leaders, today I'm honored to have Dr. Henry Cloud on the show. He's a clinical psychologist, leadership expert, and author of many books, New York Times bestselling author, which I've read several of them, which we'll talk about again today, I'm sure. Anyway, with all that being said, Henry, welcome to the show.
Good to be here.
Yeah, if you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about your background, how you got into psychology, leadership, and writing books.
Well, it wasn't planned, that's for sure. I actually went to college. I was recruited to play golf, and that was sort of my life passion. And then I had an injury and wasn't playing well, hit bottom, and had to quit because I couldn't hold on to the club because of pain in my left hand, and got depressed. And working through that depression, got really interested in psychology and growth, and changed my major from business. I came from a business family and got into psychology, and so I'm pursuing that path. And I sort of, towards the end of my training, when knocking on doors to find a job, my first job was in a leadership consulting firm as a psychologist. Now, back then, we didn't have coaching and all this kind of stuff you have now, but they did notice something, that leaders had issues. And so that they wanted a psychologist in the mix. I started working with teams and high performers, and I just fell in love with leadership. And so since day one in my career, I've kind of had two paths in the personal growth, clinical side of things, but in the business leadership side. And what I found out was those really aren't two worlds at all, because in leadership, you have to know the science of leadership if you're going to be a good leader. And nobody's trained in it. You're trained in tech or marketing or finance, and then you find yourself, you got two jobs. Now I got to lead people. So I love leadership, but then there's a person that's got to go out and do that. And so the personal issues and the personal growth and how humans work really kind of, is where it's at, in that middle space between the two. And that's been where I've hung out for a long time.
Awesome. And I do want to say thank you, as we get started, because a lot of your books have actually meant a lot to me and my family going through the years. When I first became a manager, I kind of sucked at it. And one of the books that was gifted to me by my campus pastor was Boundaries for Leaders. And reading that kind of helped me set boundaries for myself and for my team. And that meant a lot. And then we led a small group, and we did Boundaries with Kids as a study session for our small group as we were all having children. And that was very helpful for us as well. And later on in my career, Necessary Endings has been extremely important for growth and pruning teams and helping people out. So I just want to say thank you, for that work, because it has been a personal thing for me too.
Oh, well, I'm glad it's helpful. I don't consider myself an author. I'm a practitioner. So I spend 80 to 100 days a year in the war rooms with leaders and teams and companies and all that. But you do start to notice stuff, and a little bit of a model builder and pattern recognition, and this stuff starts to stand out. So eventually I say, yeah, it's probably a book. So that's how.
Probably should write this down. Yeah, I think it's great, and I'm glad that you do. So you have a new book coming out, Your Desired Future. Tell me a little bit about what made you put this one together, and what patterns have you noticed or recognized as a practitioner that help you, kind of craft this?
If you look at the leadership and performance literature, because that's sort of where I live, and there's 8,000 different topics. You go to a bookstore or Amazon or Harvard Business Review. There's so much out there. It's really important stuff. But I found that a lot of people who were trying to get better at leadership, kind of what do I need to focus on? And so I wanted to build a simple model that people could have as a little GPS and say, okay, if I'm leading something, what is it I'm supposed to be doing? What really moves the needle? And that's what started it. And I did kind of a factor analysis of all that literature. And then I I asked a question one day, you know, what's the best organization, the best performer in the world, and looking at companies or people. And then what stood out to me was it's the human body. There's nothing like it in terms of what do leaders do? We move something from here to there, right? Sales or revenues or morale or culture or your own performance. It's got to move from where it is today to a better place. And I ask, how does the human body do that? So I went to neuroscience and neuroanatomy and neurobiology and anatomy and physiology and all of that. And it was amazing that the way the human body actually gets us from where we are to another place encompassed all of that leadership literature and shows us really how to do it. So that kind of became the metaphor. And then you factor analyze all the topics, and really it comes down to really 5 buckets. So that's how it came about.
So let's go through those buckets if you don't mind.
Excuse me.
So I know the first one was vision. Can you talk a little bit about that bucket and kind of how it goes?
Well, here's what's interesting. There's not, if you look at this book and you pick up the cover and there's 5 things and everybody's going, oh, their eyes glaze up.
Yeah.
Oh, I know these things. But here's the problem. We know what they are and we start to execute them, but we do it in our own image by the way we're wired.
Mm.
And really, when you look underneath each of these, there's science to how humans perform, and there's certain kinds of visions and certain kinds of all the other aspects of this that those components have to be present for it to work. And so I don't know any leader that would look at these 5 and say, "Oh yeah, all those are important." But I've worked with countless leaders that are good at 2 or 3 of them, like we all are. We got gifts and strengths and weaknesses, but then we go start doing things in the way that we're wired, and there are some real gaps, and that's why things aren't working in the way they should be. And so that's what I try to do in the book, or what are the actual components that have to be present in each of these that we often ignore or we're not good at. And you sit above it all, and you just have to look at it and make sure are all these things working, because if one of them's not, you're not going to get there. And what's fascinating is it's sort of like the laws of physics. There's certain laws, and there is a universal path by which anything gets from here to there,
Mhm.
and these laws dictate that. But people can execute them in 50 million different ways. I mean, you look at a Steve Jobs or a Bill Gates, same time period. They did all this stuff. And they looked very different, but underneath the hood, all 5 things were present and they were doing it in a certain way. And that's what we got to make sure of. Even though you've heard vision, you've heard strategy, you've heard accountability, you've heard engaging talent, how does that actually work? And that's what I tried to do in the book.
So when someone is looking at this, how do you do a self-assessment to see where you're lacking and where you're not? Because sometimes looking in the mirror is the hardest thing. It's really hard to see where your faults are.
Well, it's really important to look and see if the mirror is still on the wall, if the walls are standing. Tiger Woods, I'm a competitive golfer my whole life, and Tiger Woods, you'll hear him say this phrase over and over. Well, there's feel and there's real. And so his teacher might be saying, you got to move the club on this path. And he's like, yeah, he's out there to do it. But when you get the video and he goes, oh, crap, it felt like I was doing that. I made this little adjustment. But really, what I'm really doing is this. And so you've hit one of the nails on the head, which is how do we know what's actually happening?
Mhm.
And unless we get outside of ourselves and begin to let reality adjust what we think we're doing, and particular results tell us the results of what we're really doing. And I don't just mean in the normal metrics that we use, like, the KPIs and the goals and all
Mhm.
this stuff, but really how you're leading. And you got to get outside yourself. And And there's really, you know, time-tested ways that we've got to see what's really happening and what I'm really doing versus what I think I'm doing or what other people think they're doing. It's going to come from outside of ourselves. And, one of the things that I always advise leaders to do is I want you to pick somebody above you and then one of your peers and somebody below you that, you're kind of above them. And I want you to go take each one of them to lunch separately and ask them this question. What's it like to be on the other side of me and my performance and my leadership? And I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to negate it. I just want to hear what it's like to be on the other side of me in two areas. Relationally, the culture and the way I'm relating to you and other people, and the actual results, my performance, how that affects you and how does it help you perform better? And just listen.
Wow.
That'll tell you. And then we get into some other parts of this is how we actually measure and hold ourselves accountable and others accountable. But it's really important before you go execute on something, are you really doing something that really matters? Peter Drucker said the worst thing you could do is execute perfectly the wrong things.
Mhm. Yeah.
And we need to know what the reality consequences and results of our leadership are really bringing about in the people that we're trying to lead and the stakeholders and, the P&L and all of it.
So when you say take someone above you, peer of yours, and below you, and ask them that question, are you expecting to get the same kind of answer from each one, or do you think do most people kind of maybe they're better at leading up than down, or vice versa? Well, what do you typically see?
Well, you said something really important because that's just true. Some people are better leading up. Some people, their bosses love them, but their teams hate them.
Hmm.
Or their bosses love them and the teams love them, but the people that report to them don't like them. And that's really because, um, we're really organized in complex ways. And we have different relational patterns depending on context. And one of the things that's really important about leadership is that we can meet the demands of reality in all the contexts that are demanded, upon us.
Hmm.
And so that's a big part of it that we we do all these areas that need performance, we do perform differently in different contexts, and that's where a lot of the lack of awareness happens. And here's the other thing about what you said. You said, do you expect to hear the same things? No. That's why you gotta learn, right? Because your expectations. I'll I'll give you an example. In the aspect of the book, about engaging talent. I went into a company one time and I was working with a CEO, and so I started to interview his direct reports. And first one, oh my gosh, worst leader I've ever had. And he's just railing on the leader. And I'd say, why? And and they go, because they're they're just, I never hear from them. Like I'm out here operating in the dark and I don't really know, what they want or am I doing it or, whatever. And they're just too distant. And so I'm taking my notes and thinking, oh, this leader's really unengaged and we got to find out where the cadence of some kind of touch point or blah, blah, blah. So then I go interview this second one. Best CEO I've ever had. And I say, why? He go, because he gives me space to work. They're not
Mm.
all, up in my shorts all the time. And and what what leaders are going to realize is, if you're expecting to hear the same thing from everybody, then it's not going to be the same. And there's another part of that is some of them are idiots. And so, you know, all feedback is not worth something
Yeah.
other than, you're going to learn something about that person or the context. So it's just really, really eye opening, to say the least.
Yeah, definitely not all feedback is created equally. Right.
Yeah, don't count your critics, weigh them.
Yes, yes, absolutely. One of the things in your book you talk about is accountability, and that's kind of been a theme of the last couple of interviews that I've had. We talked a lot about accountability and how some leaders are really good at holding people accountable and others aren't. And what does it mean to you to be to hold someone accountable? Because some people say it's punitive, some people say you lead by example. And what do you see?
Well, first of all, you said something that seems like what I see, same thing out there. You said I've had a number of conversations lately,
Mhm.
and it's really interesting, this thing of accountability. And I think some of it is, and I don't want to sound like an old codger here, but some of it is generational. That, some of the people who are a little older in the workplace grew up with, some authority structures and accountability and all of that. And some of the younger ones, it's almost like a toxic idea to them, really.
Yeah.
If it's done, or even if it's done, sometimes even if it's done, but certainly if it's done in certain ways. And so here's what I talked about in the book. Your body, you're talking about performance. Your body, as soon as you come up with a vision in the prefrontal cortex, networks go to work on that vision to organize a path, and certain systems are activated that have to do with impulse control and regulation and sequencing of resources and all of that that we need to know. But one of the things that happens is a measurement and accountability system gets called into play. We don't even know this. It's deeply wired into our system. But if I'm going to go from here to there, if I'm going to walk to the other side of the room, the brain is already calculated in some form or fashion the direction I got to go, the speed I got to go, and these activities that are going to move the needle. And when we start to walk, what happens is if you're walking to the other side of the room and you're looking at your phone, you wander off, your brain will instantly alert you to that because it's measuring you. It'll hold you accountable to it, and it'll prompt you to fix that. Now, we would not be able to get out of bed in the morning, get to the refrigerator to get coffee or milk or whatever you're looking for without our measurement and accountability systems. But what
Mhm.
we've done, because a lot of people's experience, is we've made them very negative. And people experience them as, like you said, punitive. And other people's like experience so punitive. Oh, I'm just going to lead by example. Well, when you're walking across the room or you're going to reach a new goal, there ain't another example out there doing it. And so we've got to design the actual workflow itself and also, align with the strategy and all this stuff that we do. But you got to have the right measurement and accountability systems in place that are positive and not negative. Now that gets really important. Think about this. If you're flying from LA to New York, that pilot has a vision. Okay, you got your vision. She's got a strategy and a plan. She's engaged the talent. And the plan to reach this, to make the strategy happen, there's, few specific things in there. We got to be at 40,000 feet, 540 knots, a certain heading. So she starts to execute that plan. She would never take off if she didn't have her accountability relationships in place. What if she were about to take off and the first level accountability she has her instrument panel? What if it all of a sudden stopped working? See,
Let's
accountability is designed to help us get there, not
Mhm.
punish us. So she takes off, she gets up there, she's at 38,000 feet. Her accountability relationships are measuring that, said, you know what, we're supposed to be at 40,000. You're at 38,000, beep, beep, beep. She realizes, crap, I'm at 38,000 feet. I'm burning too much fuel. I've got to adjust. And she quickly adjusts to that. And that is one of the best gifts your accountability systems that are tied to the plan give you, because she quickly adjusts and now she's back on track. But if she didn't quickly adjust, now she no longer has a problem of being at 38,000 feet for a second. she's got a pattern. Now she's on a different path, and her plan has mutated. And when we get mutations in DNA, that becomes identity. So you're no longer the company that we missed a product launch date. If that's not fixed through your accountability systems, you don't have a problem of missing a product launch. Now you become the company that misses product launches because that pattern has grown neurological networks in people's heads and behavior and all that. And that's the new normal. That's how we operate. Your accountability is your immune system.
Mm, I
Your
love
body
that.
would never allow that infection to continue, and that's a very positive thing. I love the way that Alan Mulally did this when he went to Ford from Boeing. He had a Thursday morning meeting. It was very clear. Here's the plan, and we're going to check in with each other. But it was there to help each other. So if something went from green to yellow, the whole team begins to work on how do we fix this? How do we work together? It's not punitive. It's not shaming. They had behavioral rules of how we're going to respect each other and try to help, and they killed it. Very important.
Yeah, yeah. I think the way I like to describe accountability is kind of like bumpers in bowling, right? We're there to help you stay on track and to learn the pattern. We don't want you to punish you, for getting out necessarily. We want to just guide you in the right direction and keep you in a lane,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. I use the example. I'm a lifelong boater, and everybody's got the bigger's better disease if you love boats. And so the first time and we lived in Southern California for a long time, and it had a lot of boats. And the first one that I got that was big enough to have all these systems, uh, we picked it up. We're in Marina Del Rey, and we're going down to Newport Beach, which is a pretty good trek because you got to go out past the peninsula and all that. And so I'm learning all the systems, and so I go down to the master stateroom. I'm gonna go to the bathroom, and I'm hearing this noise go. And I go, oh my gosh, something's wrong in the engine room. And I run up to the fly bridge, and I'm talking to the yacht broker, and I go, something's wrong down there. I'm hearing this noise. And he runs down there, and he starts laughing and goes, dude, that's the autopilot. I never had an autopilot before. And I said, well, why is it making all that noise? He said, because when we got out around, past the peninsula of Palos Verdes, he said these swells started getting really big, and you're constantly knocked off course. And so I set it pretty tight. So as soon as it gets off our heading, it adjusts and it gets us back on track. And he said if I hadn't put it that tight, we could keep going, for 500 yards, and that becomes a much longer trip. And I realized that's measurement and accountability done right. It didn't spank anybody. It didn't become an autoimmune disease and start eating the boat like our immune system goes awry and eats the body. It helps. And it doesn't have to be punitive, but it's got to be in place. And it's got to be directly tied to the activities that move the needle. And here's why. You look back and we said, okay, we're going to make this many calls. We're going to send this email campaign, or you're going to call on so many customers. Whatever your activities are, they're going to make the strategy work. And you get back together and say, how's it going? Well, we were into 100 of them. We only did 73. Don't be the typical leader and say, well, you got to do more. You got to get out there this month and you got to do more. And they start to push. No, do not do that. Ask one question. Okay, well, why not? See, now you're into a root cause analysis of why your plan didn't get executed. You may have a performance problem in a person. You may have a resource problem. You may have overloaded them with competing agendas that you can't do both. It may be a leadership issue, but you get in there, you solve that problem, and then you go do it again, and you're going to learn. The second reason is this, and this is huge. What if you have accountability and everybody did exactly what the plan said do perfectly. Then you ask the second question, well, if we did we get the results that we expected to get? If the answer is yes, pour on the gas. If you're getting that kind of return on each ad, buy more ads. But if you're not getting the results that you expected, well, don't keep doing that. Stop. Go back to the strategy and the plan and say, where do we need to tweak it? And you will never know that without measurement and accountability.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think it was Peter Drucker that also said, if you don't measure, you can't manage it,
That's right.
and making sure you measure is really important. Um,
Somebody said, it might have been Alan, said, can't manage the secret.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I think that's super important when it comes to communicating as well. One of the things that I like about all of your content that I've read so far is that it's not just something I can use at work. It's something I can take home and use in my family
Yeah.
life and as a parent as well. Um, how is this book? Does this book follow the same patterns? And if so, how is that?
That kind of hits at the heart of my problem. As I said in, the story of history, I came into this field as a clinical psychologist. And so clinical psychologists mainly work on people's lives, your clinical issues, anxiety, fear, depression, stress, relationship problems, marriage, family, parenting, dating, extend. You shouldn't do marriage and dating, pick
Yeah.
one. But our relational world, relational skills, and then performance, reaching goals. But then I found myself in this leadership context and I fell in love with leadership. And what I learned, and then I started a company about 5 years into it. I wanted to do a psychiatric hospital that was friendlier to people of faith because a lot of them would check in with depression or anxiety or something, and their faith would be seen as part of the problem. And I said, well, we got to solve that and make this good for everybody. And so I I did one hospital unit and that one worked, and then I did another one, and that one worked, and ended up with treatment centers in 45 markets in the Western United States, and turned into a significant company, and ran that for about 10 or 12 years. And then I found myself on the inside of this leadership thing. Now, I'm not just a consultant, I'm doing it. And what what happened with all of that is I started to see more and more and more business and life is done by they're both done by humans.
Hmm.
And so it's it's the way that we function and the way that things actually happen that we have to know. And you're the equipment, and it's going to be the same equipment at home as it is at work. The laws of physics are still present. And that's kind of why I've always had a problem. I mean, I literally have a business problem we've never fully been able to solve is am I am I a psychologist or are you a leadership consultant? And I go, yeah. And so I end up with the books, especially when you get in the business side of this, they're really business life. And my publisher, Harper, of all those books, is really understands that. And so, and if you take Covey, sort of the granddaddy of a lot of this, um, he you take 7 habits. Those are true at home and they're true at work. So that's kind of why that is. It's sort of business life,
Hmm.
business/life.
Yeah, I found so many things that you put together be helpful both at work and at home when it comes to, when I'm looking at how to parent my kids. Sometimes I'll take a tool that works there and use it when I'm managing and leading people here at work, and it works both places. It is just, when I first had that epiphany, it was one of the small group sessions we were doing. We learned a tool called "What's Your Plan For?" And it was like if your kid didn't do what they're supposed to do, instead of coming down really hard on them and punishing them, ask a simple question of "What's your plan for?" And that tells them that you realize they haven't done this thing yet that you told them to do, and now you're but you're offering them an out to say, I've got this plan to do this, I'm going to do this, and give them the opportunity to kind of correct themselves before the punishment comes. So I found that at work when somebody didn't turn in a report on time, I would send them a message, say, hey, what's your plan for getting this report done, today? And hopefully get that, positive response to show that I still have faith in them that they'll get it done, but I haven't seen the results yet.
It's not punitive. It gives them a path, and it
Mhm.
doesn't sort of assume that they don't care or don't have one. But it does raise the issue. It's sort of like the instrument panel. It starts to be, well, if that doesn't work, then what's your plan for if that doesn't work?
Yeah, exactly.
And so in the section on measurement accountability, one of the things I talk about that is really, really important is something called mutually agreed upon expectations. So if we start out in the beginning, accountability, the word actually means to answer to a trust. So I'm trusting you to do this. You're trusting me to do my part. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what you're going to do. And then we're going to answer to each other and see how we're doing so we can improve it. So we start out, both of us have agreed that's what we're going to do. And then one of the key components is before you do it, ask the question, okay, well, what then?
Mm.
Right. So if we say we're going to do this and we get here next week and it's not done, then what will we do?
Yeah.
And there can be a lot of answers to that. We might have to get you a coach, might have to get a tutor. Um, we may give you, because we've done this 47 times, an opportunity to go be successful at a different company. we, you have to- it, but we have to know, when you're walking across a ledge, your body really needs to know what then? What if I don't watch where I'm going?
Mhm.
Because the what then, the ability for the brain to anticipate outcomes and adjust behavior accordingly is a big part of doing the behavior today that we need to be doing. Otherwise, we're just kind of, who cares? Another part of accountability that's important is right after the expectation is set for each other, well, define what done means.
Mm.
In other words, what will it mean? What will it look like to have met this expectation? Everybody's had the experience of, if you got kids, mom or dad, she'll, after dinner, she'll say, okay, kids, you're not to clean up the kitchen. And so do it. And she runs off and goes and reads her book or watches some show or whatever. Well, about 30 minutes later, you hear this scream from the kitchen. Girls, I told you to clean up the kitchen. Then you hear a scream from the other side of the house. We did. And then you hear from the kitchen, you call this clean? See, they hadn't defined what it will look like to meet the expectation.
Yep.
That, oh my gosh, that gets rid of so much brain damage when you say, what will it look like? I want you, if you can, we got the meeting on Monday. If you can get your finance report in to me by Wednesday, so I'll have time to do it. Great, we got the expectation. But what does it mean to actually get that report to me? Am I going to get an email that said everything's on budget? Well, no, that may be good enough. Maybe that's all I need. But maybe I need, here's what it means. It'll be in a certain format so I can hand it out. And we got to know what it means to get there.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's one of the things I like about the Scrum project management, process is we define what done means prior to starting the project. Because, when it comes to writing software, some people will say, "Well, done's finished when we move it into testing." Other people will say, "Well, done's when it's ready for deployment." And from a business standpoint, done's not done until customers are using it and it's making money. That's my definition of done. So we have to have that defined so that we
And
know when it's rolled out.
everybody's doing their part and thinking they're doing great.
Yeah, exactly.
It's what you said earlier. But unless we are working from the same definition of what it means to score a touchdown, you know, there's gonna be people spread out all happy all over the field, and ain't nobody happy until we won that game.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point is having the expectation. What's the best way to communicate that? Is it in writing? Is it in person? Is it a little bit of both? Because sometimes that gets hard because I met with bosses before that they thought they communicated their expectation to me and I totally didn't get it. And
Sure.
uh, so I
You
was just
call
wondering
this
what do you see
clean?
the best? Yeah, exactly. You call this clean?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I did in the book was I actually divided up the accountability section into two different chapters. One of them was how it works and what's got to be done and how to design it, your accountability relationships and systems. But the next chapter is called having the accountability conversation, because that's really important. One of the
Mhm.
things we know is, and this is a term that's kind of overused now, and it gets used in crummy ways and in bad ways and in good ways, but it's called psychological safety.
Mhm.
Now, psychological safety, in the good sense of the word, means that we're doing something interpersonally in a way that the other person's brain can actually work. The last thing you want to do is have an accountability conversation that's diminishing IQ in the person that you're asking for behavior from.
Mhm.
And so when you're saying, how do you have it? It's got to be in a way that has certain kinds of clarity, certain kinds of, urgency, certain kinds of tone, certain kinds of things that are going to up the performance of the other person. And that's a really important part of it. One of the things I've done with teams a lot, and they're talking about accountability, is to ask them, okay, guys, we're gonna a team accountability thing going, a peer accountability thing going, which is the by far the strongest. But first, I want everybody to think of the word accountability, and what does that feel like to you? So I have the team say, "Ugh, God, I hate it," or "I'm waiting on getting beat up," or somebody else said, "Oh, I really love it because I can't," and they all have different experiences. So then I ask the question, okay, I'll put up a flip chart, two different flip charts. On this one, think of a time when accountability really, really was crummy for you and really didn't help. And just tell me what that was like. And I write all those things down. It was harsh. They didn't set the expectation, all this stuff we're talking
Mhm.
about. And you get the bad list up there. Okay, well, tell me a time when accountability really helps you improve and perform better. And we get the ingredients of that. And then I turn and look at it and say, guys, what you just did is you designed your accountability system. Because the way we're going to do this, we're going to not do any of these things and we're going to do these things. And you factor analyze those, and there's 12 of them, but they're really talking about four. And that becomes the behavioral anchors. This is what Mullally did. He had behavioral anchors in how the accountability was going to be done. Then the other thing you got to do in accountability is make sure that it is tied to the activities that move the needle. That's what's important. Everybody thinks about holding us accountable to the goal, to the release date, to the quality standard. Your body, yeah, it wants to know when it gets there and how you're doing to get there. But if it's not holding you accountable to actually taking a step after you take the first one, or making the step long enough or not too long where you fall down, it's the activities that have to be monitored first, because those are the leading indicators, not the lagging indicators. And that's a big part of it. And the other part is, what's your cadence? You know, the autopilot, he changed the cadence. It was set on one checking in correction cadence to when the seas got rough, he shortened it, right? Sometimes people that all they have is an annual performance review. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
We shouldn't even have performance reviews, because if we're reviewing our performance every day, by the end of the year, everybody knows what's going to happen in that meeting. We're either going to be
Mhm.
celebrating or somebody's going to be, ushered out the door, or before that. It, you got to figure out the right cadence. Your doctor, if they're trying to move your your numbers on your blood pressure, for example, or on an infection, let's take that one.
Mhm.
They have a strategy. We're going to use an antibiotic, but there's a plan that says the activities of how that antibiotic is going to make the strategy work. I want you to take one one pill 3 times a day for 10 days. All right. There's our cadence. Why is there a cadence? And this is what people have got to think about with their people. You take one in the morning, and that's got an effect curve. So it's having an effect, and that accountability conversations has an effect, but it's got a half-life to it. And it's gonna be metabolized and, you know, out of the system by 1 or 2 o'clock, and you come in and you have the second pill before that drops,
Mhm.
on and on and on. And so some projects, some people need a certain cadence, other people need a different cadence. And what leadership's got to do, there's a lot of time that can be really saved by a lot of accountability, measurement, reporting in conversations that really aren't necessary. They could be done in an email, but then there are a lot of them that you're not going to make it if you don't do. But you've got to really tie them to the activities that move the needle. That's what's important.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic, and I like having those regular one-on-ones to where we're always checking in, and you're always kind of bouncing things off of each other and knowing where everybody stands. So there's no confusion. It's fully transparent because if you do what you say, you wait till like one of those quarterly or annually reviews. By then, you could be so off course that if the autopilot can't fix it. It's too far off at that point.
The worst
But
thing you
yeah,
can do is be on the wrong road and have hope that somehow it turns into the right road. You're way off course by that.
yeah, like sometimes in my golf swing, I may end up on the wrong fairway, but if I'm
Hey,
only looking where I'm at, I'm
speaking
on a fairway, but I'm on the wrong one.
speaking of, are you a big golfer?
No, not as good as not as big as I want to be, but I live on a golf course. I watch the Masters.
Okay,
But
speaking of being on the wrong fairway, Rory gets the Fix and Adapt award in this whole system. He was hitting it all over the golf course.
I cannot believe the fact that he was 6 under and didn't hit any fairways or maybe two. What was it? It was yeah
I,
crazy.
I don't think he hit. This is pretty close to right. He did not hit a fairway on all the par fives, I think, until number 13 on Sunday.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right.
And those are the makeup shots holes.
Hmm.
It was unbelievable. But he fixed it and adapted it very well.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what we all got to do as leaders. Yeah. So, Henry, thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing information with us and helping us out to learn about accountability and other things. How can people connect with you online, learn more about what you're doing, and pick up a copy of your book?
Yeah, the copy of the book, it's called Your Desired Future. It's available now. If you go to wherever books are sold, and that's mentioned just one. Probably not at 7-Eleven, but other places. I don't know if they have it or not. But if you go to drcloud.com, I've also got a couple of pretty extensive online platforms. One in leadership called Leadership University, and it's
Mhm.
modular. It's a really interesting program because we filmed it not as a talking head, but as a more Anthony Bourdain-like television series. And it's got 12 or 13 episodes of a different leadership construct filmed around the world in a real story. Like, why did the Panama Canal fail? And then why did it succeed? It was the leadership and what they did differently. So we flew to Panama anyway. It's got a
Yeah, I was about to
bunch.
ask you, did you get to travel there? Like, do you go to all the places?
I went to Panama. I went to Japan. I
Oh,
went to
wow.
Italy. We're the greatest winemaker in the world. Went to Alaska with the Iditarod champion out on the glacier. I mean, it's crazy. Went to Dubrovnik to figure out how they built the walls that protected the cities.
Oh, that
It,
sounds like so
it,
much
it was
fun.
it was a lot of fun. And then there's a personal growth platform. It on the website, it may still say boundaries.me,
Mhm.
or it may say becoming whole. We're starting to sort of reposition that because it's more than boundaries, but that's the personal growth one. And all
Awesome.
of that's on drcloud.com.
Awesome. I'll link that too in the show notes at geekleader.com so people can go there and click through. And again, Henry, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Good to be with you. Thanks a lot.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Please go to geekleader.com to learn more about what this guest is up to, click on their links, and connect with them online. I would also greatly appreciate it if you could leave me a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show. And make sure you've subscribed if you haven't already. And if you feel so inclined, you can leave me a tip by going to geekleader.com/tip.